Before we get into part 3, I did want to say there is a spoiler warning for this episode. It goes into a lot of spoilers in terms of season 2 and beyond, so if you do not want to be spoiled for House of the Dragon, I would highly advise you clicking off of this video. You have been warned, we go into spoilers. Also, if you want to check out the finale, it'll be on the Advocates channel tomorrow at the same time, 4 p.m. at U.S. Central Time. Also, give him some love for this series. He's put a lot of work into it, and so I hope you guys enjoy, and let's dive into part 3.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
So a brief introduction, given that this is split up into parts. We are now talking about like the midpoint, the after effects of Rook's Rest. So if you did miss prior parts, I would check those out before this one. But we're kind of focusing on kind of the second half or the ending of season 2 and getting into season 3 and so forth.
The aftermath of the battle happens, and at least in the book, Aegon, the eldest, gets taken back to King's Landing, where he's recuperating from his injuries. And at least my belief is that he'll just kind of stay there for the rest of the season, kind of recouping from his injuries. Aemond, this is where Aemond is kind of like, oh, like, you know, my damn uncle, like, oh, he took everything from me. This is where I'm gonna, you know. And Chris said kind of just eggs him on, like, yeah, you should totally go to Harrenhal and try to take over, you know, Harrenhal, where your uncle is currently staying at. But the consequence of this whole thing is that the Blacks are now short a dragon. They're short many dragon riders, because besides Daemon, who at this point has taken over Harrenhal and is currently getting a little bit cozy with our Melisandre-like enchantress. So while he's kind of cozying it up with his Alice Rivers bunkmate, Rhaenyra is just kind of on Dragonstone by herself. And sure, you've got Jacaerys there with her as another potential dragon rider, but that's only 2 dragon riders. So then this is where kind of one of my favorite moments from the Dance of the Dragons War happens, and that's when they sow the seeds and they call to action any potential bastard-born children of Targaryen descent to come to Dragonstone and then attempt to claim a dragon, and any would-be dragon riders would then be given titles and, more importantly, a dragon, and would then help the cause of the Blacks to try to take back King's Landing from the Greens. And so this ultimately results in Ulf the White and Hugh the Hammer, 2 very dubious characters who I'm sure will play a big role in season 3, whenever that, when those events happen. But it also results in the christening of Corlys's not bastard son, Adam of Hole. He bears a striking resemblance to our sea snake, and our sea snake Corlys is just kind of like, you know,
Definitely, I'm not the father.
Exactly.
These kids don't show up till after Rhaenys dies. Very sus.
Very, very sus. But it ultimately results in the christening of these new dragon riders, who then take our dragons to King's Landing. But that also kind of leads me to the big hot topic that a lot of book readers have discussed, and that is the potential cutting of the Nettles character from the show. Grease, what are your thoughts, my man?
Well, I'll just say right away, she is cut. There's no potential. She's not in it.
Is that just
unless they throw a wrench?
Is that just based off the fact that we see Rhaena Targaryen on?
Well, I'm basing this off of just sources that I've heard and the leaks of it. So yes, but also yes, that as well.
Gotcha.
It seems like they are very much just going to go a different way with that, which is kind of, I don't know how to feel about it, because the big issue is going into more spoilers for later on.
Right.
Daemon and Nettles seem to have, in Fire and Blood, one of 2 things going on. A father-daughter type relationship, which is the way it seems like it's going to go on the show if Nettles is cut.
Right.
But there was also this idea that Rhaenyra believed, or she had information that she then believed, that the 2 were having a relationship. Now, that doesn't really seem possible in the show in terms of if this is going to be his daughter.
Yeah.
So are they going to go with just Rhaenyra is becoming very paranoid, and so she just distrusts Daemon in general, and that's what leads to something there? We've already seen some scenes in season 1 between Rhaenyra and Daemon that have shown that cracks in the armor.
Yeah.
But I don't know. What do you think about it?
Yeah, that is interesting that you said that it could be just one of those things where Rhaenyra is more paranoid about Daemon kind of hooking up with Nettles, which I guess is not going to be Nettles in the show. Would probably be Rhaena Targaryen here, which I don't know, it would be a little weird. But it could be more of the fact that Daemon isn't actually, hooking up with anyone, and Rhaenyra, it's kind of more, you could just kind of building cracks within Rhaenyra's mindset that kind of allow us to see her and Daemon's relationship break further and further apart. And so it is possible that Daemon doesn't even do anything, any marriage breaking stuff here, and he's just, just hanging out with Rhaena Targaryen here, and Rhaenyra is just kind of imagining this whole scenario in her head. But I do think that if she is going to fabricate this imaginary cheating going on between Daemon and whoever, I think it would make more sense if it was Nettles than if it was Rhaena.
I agree.
I don't know, something about it just kind of, I mean, granted, it's medieval times, but the first person that you assume,
though, even the Targaryens, it's like, with your daughter, like, really?
Yeah. It's like, she's like, oh, Daemon's not sleeping with me. That mean he's sleeping with his niece or his daughter. It's like, oh, it's like, really? That's the conclusion you jump to? Wouldn't it make more sense? It's like, oh, he's sleeping with Nettles. It's like, oh, okay. Some would-be dragon rider that was able to claim sheep stealer. It's like, yeah. That totally makes sense, because that's pretty hot. Stealing sheep stealer, that's hot. Being
So
a
I'm
daughter,
kind of just
not hot.
as you're talking, like, I'm kind of thinking, like, maybe they'll do something like this. Maybe they'll kind of split this into something else, where maybe Daemon is like hooking up with somebody else, not Rhaena, but like just somebody else that's like a Nettles-esque character, and that's where they go with it. So they just split up that dynamic that was going on. I don't know. It's a very interesting question. It's the same like thing I have with like certain plotlines they set up in season 1 that I wasn't like a huge fan of.
Gotcha.
But I guess we'll have to see. I don't know. We don't know all the details yet, so it's just speculation.
Yeah. So I guess in this hypothetical scenario where Daemon would be potentially sleeping with someone who isn't Nettles or Rhaena, who would that be then if it's not a dragon rider?
You can do. I mean, just fabricate some woman somewhere. Gotcha. I mean, you could just make it just that simple. That Daemon has already shown he seems very lusty in the show.
Yeah.
So, maybe he just hooks up with some people. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, Rhaenyra clearly, well, obviously they weren't together at this point, but Rhaenyra didn't care about Daemon, hooking up with Mysaria. But hopefully by now
that's true.
Yeah. So. The sowing of the seeds, that's going to take place in season 2 per the trailers, which then leads us to the season 2 finale. Now, Grease, here's what I think is going to happen, and I've made a video on this where I think season 2 will end. So, in the book, prior to, like, after the sowing of the seeds, but prior to the Blacks taking over King's Landing, there is another battle that happens called the Battle of the Gullet. However, I don't think the Battle of the Gullet will take place in season 2. Do
you want me to confirm something for you or no?
Okay, yeah, confirm it before I get ahead of myself here.
The Battle of the Gullet will not be in season 2.
Okay, that's what I thought. And it makes sense because that would be 2 giant dragon battles within one season. I think they only have the budget for one dragon battle.
It's also going to be one of the biggest naval battles ever probably on screen. So
yeah.
It might be better if that gets pushed to the next season.
Probably so. So what I think is going to happen is I think the producers are going to mess around with the timeline of events here, and they're going to hold off on the Battle of the Gullet till next season, which is where Jacaerys Valerian dies. But the Greens will still, or sorry, the Blacks will still take over King's Landing because they have more than enough dragon firepower to take over King's Landing. And I think the season will end with them taking over and then Rhaenyra sitting herself on the Iron Throne, which then she finds out that she's got a cut on her hand. And that's when everybody's like, oh, the Iron Throne has spurned her. And then I think the camera will fade to black there and it'll be like at the end of the season. But I want to hear your thoughts. Where do you think the season 2 will end?
I do think that's a very good place for it. I think another place you could maybe end it off would be just like right before all that happens. So you start that out in the next season with the Battle of the Gullet and the, Blacks taking over King's Landing. I think it could be something where we see kind of like an ending of season 1 of Game of Thrones, where Jace is kind of coming into his own, and it kind of shows him being the kind of the power, not the power behind the Blacks because Daemon's the power behind them, but like he's the one in control of Dragonstone and taking more of a leadership role, kind of how Robb was, building him up as this character going into the next season to be, kind of the leader. He is the heir, to be killed. And we could do something like that, but I also think, taking King's Landing is a good landing spot. I think all that's pretty good. The Greens fleeing King's Landing.
Yeah, that's true.
Hopefully we can see some battles in the Riverlands. So I think we had a bit of a miscommunication here. So I want to clarify what each of us were kind of talking to and alluding to. I was alluding to kind of some of the battles in the Riverlands in terms of the Blackwoods and the Brackens. That conflict's been kind of hinted at in the first season. He wanted to kind of move this towards the Reach, so I think he may have misheard me or something like that. But yeah, so he's talking about kind of this stuff with Daeron and the Greens in the South, and I was kind of talking about the Riverlands. So we got that a little bit miscommunicated, but just so you guys can know and clarify what we're talking about, that's my clarification.
Our missing third son that nobody gives a shit about in King's Landing. Daeron, who? Who's Daeron? What?
It's travesty because Daeron, when I read Fire and Blood, was the only Green I liked. I mean, I respected those other characters, but they were in the way of the Blacks and Rhaenyra's side, so I don't like them. But Daeron, I can't hate the guy. He's super cool. I am very sad he's not in this season. I was sad he wasn't in the last season.
So that is confirmed then he's not in the season for sure.
I'm like, oh, by the way, when I'm saying this, I'm basing this off of sources I have with other YouTubers or people that have done leaks and stuff into the show and no background information. Pretty sure Daeron's not in the season. He hasn't been cast. There's no more promotional stuff around the character. Nothing's been said about the character. Even the actress that plays Alicent seems like, oh yeah, I have this fourth son or third son when we don't know really about him. So I don't know. Kind of everything's kind of leading to that character is not in the season.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy. If they do introduce Daeron in season 3, or maybe if they're I have no idea if they're cutting him completely from the story or if they're going to include him in a later season. But if they do include him, it'd be kind of... One of the funniest comments that I saw was someone saying like, oh, Daeron appears at season 3 premiere, and he just starts talking about all these things he did. And everybody's like, oh, Daeron, what a great guy. And we're just kind of led to believe, we're just supposed to believe these characters. They're like, oh yeah, I guess Daeron's just been here all along. And yeah, he's pretty great. And
which is really weird because like the stuff that's happening, in the Reach and stuff is a kind of a big part of the war. Like the big problem for the Greens is they can't unite any of their armies really. Like they have, the West, they have kind of in the South as their support. None of it's kind of connected. Whereas like Rhaenyra's support is all kind of connected. It's kind of like the Robert's Rebellion crew, right?
Right.
So that's one of the other big issues where these isolated battles going off in different regions where some people are picking Rhaenyra, some people are picking Aegon, whatever. Yeah, it's kind of weird if we don't see a lot of that, especially in the Reach where the Green's power should be the highest.
Yeah. I'm not sure what they're going to do. I mean, maybe they might show like Ormond Hightower there just kind of having a skirmish there, and then I don't know, you see like the silhouette of a dragon and he looks up and then it just kind of cuts to the next scene. And then in the next season, we're just like, oh yeah, Daeron saved us. It's like, oh, okay. I would have liked to see that dragon actually land in the Riverlands, but sure, whatever you say, Ormond Hightower. We believe you.
We believe you, dude. Yeah, you got a lot of cred, I guess, in the 3 scenes we've seen you in.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I guess your assumption is that the season 2 will kind of be more of a quieter season finale where, after the events
Yeah.
of the sowing of the seeds, it's just the blacks just kind of maybe planning things. It's showing Jace, kind of coming to his own as a leader. It's showing, their preparations for this battle that's about to take place, and then the season just ends there.
Yeah, because I think the one thing that's I think is difficult is, because the season is shorter than season 1, it's hard to predict like how quick are we going to move in terms of
Yeah,
events,
yeah,
right? If we're saying Rook's Rest happens, around episode 4 or 5 in the middle
hmm
of the season, how much are we going to get of this dragon seeds? Is that going to be 1 episode, or are we going to expand that into 2 episodes? Are we going to get a reaction to Rook's Rest kind of
right,
stuff?
right,
But something that we really saw with like big events in Game of Thrones, for instance, is there's usually an episode that will react to it. So Ned's death kind of had a reactionary episode,
right, right,
or the Red Wedding had, a reactionary episode, and or season. Season
right,
4 is basically a reaction to Red Wedding. So it'll be interesting to see how they space out all these conflicts and how much we're getting of characters and development stuff or moving the plot forward.
right. No, that's totally true. Like Game of Thrones, for the first, I guess, for the first 6 seasons, it had this formula where episode 9 was the big climax, the second to last
Yeah.
episode. And then the final episode was kind of this kind of quieter epilogue where you kind of reflect on what happened in the episode prior. So it would be appropriate for episode 9 to be this big moment where you have all these dragon seeds coming together, or episode 7 I should say, because it's 8 episodes. Episode 7 would be this big moment where all the dragon seeds are coming together and everyone's kind of sowing the seeds, and Aemond is striking forth towards Harrenhal. And then episode 8 will be just, I guess, them planning quietly amongst each other and trying to figure out
Preparing, kind of like sowing that discord where it's like, the
Right.
Greens are sitting here. If you're at King's Landing, you're like, well, we've got no protection now. The
Yeah,
King's kind of on his deathbed. It kind of feels like,
that's
what's going to
true.
go on. There's a lot of unease, build up, kind of what they did in season 8 almost. This is one of the only things that I think they did good, is like building up the anticipation to the big battle at Winterfell.
Right.
You do that, and then you start at the next season, and then you got a bunch of big things you got to hit where it's, the Blacks taking over King's Landing. You got the Battle of the Gullet. There's a lot of season 3 is set up to probably be the biggest season. So
Yeah, you could also have like Laris Clubfoot. Well, maybe you'd want to like keep it a surprise, but Laris Clubfoot kind of removing Aegon II from his room, from his quarters, because when the Blacks would take over, they see that both he, his wife, their children, and Laris are missing from the castle. So maybe you could kind of plant the seeds for that in the finale. That's true. There could be a lot of stuff that could happen here in season 2 because, like as you mentioned, season 2, plot wise, probably, or battle wise, event wise, has more going on for it than season 1. But even still, the bulk, the meat and potatoes of the Dance of the Dragons War has actually yet to happen. I think most of that stuff will actually happen in season 3 with the battle, as you mentioned, with the Battle of the Gullet, the takeover of King's Landing, all the events that follow up after that. Rhaenyra's kind of descent into madness, as then she eventually inevitably gets burned by Aegon the Eldest. Spoilers.
Yep. So I hope you all enjoyed part 3. If you do want to see the finale, part 4, we're kind of talking more on the future of House of the Dragon, the next one, talking about kind of season 3, season 4, all that stuff. And I hope you guys all enjoyed. Check out the Advocate channel, be on his channel at 4 p.m. tomorrow, U.S. Central Time, and I'll see you guys in the next one.